I am Jamila Medley. I use she, her pronouns. I am here both with Illuminate and the Partnership Funds. So just to kind of give you a sense of what we're going to do, I'll just do a brief overview of what the Partnership Funds are or is. We'll do, I'm going to do a little bit of an activity, especially since we all just ate. Maybe moving around might be appreciated a little bit. But then I'll talk a bit about what the Collective Courage Fund is and how it kind of got started. And then we'll do some work together around civic engagement strategies and thinking about how, answering some questions about whether or not our cooperatives might be interested in doing this and what might keep us from doing it, and what do we need to do it, right? So just a little bit more about me. I came into the co-op sector about a decade ago, working at Mariposa Food Co-op in West Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where I was the membership coordinator, and while there also helped to found the Philadelphia Area Cooperative Alliance, which is a co-op of co-ops and a nonprofit organization as well that was invested in really trying to figure out how do we organize all these different co-op sectors to be supportive of one another in an effort to advocate for, promote, and grow the cooperative economy in our region. So I did that work in various roles, including as the executive director, which I exited that role in just last year. I'm heading up on my 1 year anniversary of not being an executive director. But since 2018, I've been a consultant with Illuminate, and also kind of started doing some work with the partnership funds out of relationships that I built here at the Up and Coming conference. The partnership funds, and if Erin was here, she would tell you, she is the executive director of the partnership funds. And, oh, y'all are just moving on your own. Okay, I didn't know that. There's a timer on it. Oh, let me stop that. See if I can, at least. Maybe that works, we'll see. So the partnership funds works with membership-based, mostly civic engagement organizations, and more recently with cooperatives as well, in 11 states, to really try to support those organizations in developing independent political power. And that means that it's power that's coming up from the people. These organizations tend to be, pretty grassroots oriented in their locales. I don't know how to make that stop. If anybody else does, you're welcome to work on it. And it also, it does this work in a way that is multiracial and multi-class, with this expectation that the people who are experiencing the issues at hand the most are the ones who are also cultivated to be leading these efforts within these organizations to grow their independent political power. So the Collective Courage Fund, Erin Dale is also with the Fertile Ground Food Co-op in North Carolina. And some of you might have been aware that over the last few years, there seems to be like a lot more Black people coming to this conference.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh my goodness. Erin was certainly amongst those people, and as we've been organizing and listening to the needs, we've had opportunities to meet with one another and to talk about what do Black-led co-ops need, right? And what would be to their advantage as they're doing this base building within their memberships. To also be thinking about how to leverage opportunities for civic engagement and thinking about political power building within their communities as well, while doing this organizing work with their members and increasing participation. And so that's my short narrative of the history of the Collective Courage Fund, is that it's kind of grounded both in the work that the Partnership Funds is doing and Erin's vision for that work, and also seeing the needs of the co-ops, right? And trying to really figure out, well, how do we bring together this narrative and this real opportunity to see economic and political power both coming up through our co-ops together. And when we think, I guess, more specifically about why do this work with Black co-ops, part of it is like I don't know what's happening here, so sorry about this. But we understand that, actually, let me just bring up my computer. And it's okay if you see the poll question go on. Let's see what happens. I don't know how long that will stay up there. But we know that Black folks are the most consistent and predictable voting demographic. We all waited, or many of us waited at least in 2020 for Black folks to show up and figure out what to do and get us Georgia. We understand that, you know, a lot of money is put into political elections. Very little of that funding is diverted or expended to support turning out Black voters. And we also understand that the participation of the Black vote, it ebbs and flows, right? So we gotta keep doing that work of having these conversations in our community to remind people, inform people about what the issues are and engage them so that we can work with them to come out to vote as well when these elections are coming up. And hi to the folks that are joining us. Great. Quick question. In the past 4 years, just by show of hands, have you been contacted by an organization to go vote that does not represent the community you serve? There's one in the back, there's one there. Okay. How did you feel when that happened? Or what was your thought? You remember?
They just want my money.
It what?
They just want my money.
They just want my money, right? So somebody outside of your community, maybe not really interested in your community, asking you for what you need, for what they need.
I was contacted by another voter to encourage me to vote, and I live in Pennsylvania, so I think they realized, you know, they wanted us to all go out and vote. So I took it as peer-to-peer. I was happy for that.
Right, so in that way, it was someone from a different state saying, hey, your election is important for all of us. Got it. And has your cooperative ever contacted people to encourage them to vote in your community? Show of hands. Okay, a handful. So it's possible. Does anybody want to talk a little bit about what they did as a part of that contact?
During the election, we just encouraged people on our social media to go vote, like in the national one. But for our board elections, we contacted our members too as well, and just kind of reaching out to our community of co-op members and also the broader community.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Okay, so I want to invite you all to have a little bit of a conversation with one another for a few minutes. I'm gonna pull up this prompt.
We also did a post about the school board election. We should get more of that.
So we're gonna just take some time to talk with someone in the room that you don't know. Hopefully, and say that again.
Oh, we were just saying hi.
Oh, yay, it's starting. And we're gonna do this in 3 rounds, so you'll have a chance to connect with a few different people. Just talking about what is the issue or some of the political issues in your community that maybe your co-op could organize around, right? Some of the issues that came up in your conversations. Well, look, we can't just talk about the issues. We gotta get to fixing them, right? So we're gonna try to get to solutions too.
All right.
But this is your last time to vent by saying what the issue was, and I'm gonna write it down, and they'll be in the room with us. Okay? Who wants to share? Yes.
Okay, I didn't share this with my first partner. I talked a little bit about some things that are going on in South LA, but one of the things that has happened recently, there's a mall that was being sold in the middle of, and this mall was identified when we did our market study. We did our market study on a different location. But she said, if you could get in that mall, it would be even better, basically. So the mall was owned by some pension funds, and they were ready to sell it. And they had a buyer, the CIM group wanted to come in and buy it. And the local organization, Downtown Crenshaw, fought, and they went away. Then Downtown Crenshaw went and raised $30 million to buy the mall, and were turned away. And the buyer that they sold it to is a Russian from out of town who has no stake in the community, and was given extra time to pay when Downtown Crenshaw already had their money. They gave them an extension on their bid so that they could get their money together. And, I don't know. It was about, we don't want to sell it to the black folks, I think.
How would you describe that issue?
How would I
Succinctly.
how would I describe it? Unfair.
Yeah. Is it gentrification? Is it, I don't know what the community is.
Redlining?
Redlining? Is it?
Yeah, it's kind of redlining. They're trying to take Crenshaw back.
It was economic redlining as opposed to political redlining.
Right,
Okay. Thank you. Let's see if we can catch a couple more.
Okay, in Flint area, you know that we have dealt with the water crisis of 2014. And fast forwarding, the ARPA funds that the USDA is granting out to areas, Flint is getting $94 million. So out of that $94 million, the North Flint Food Market was asking for $600,000. That's going towards our equipment package. So I'm at home one night, putting my kids to bed. It's 9:30 at night. A member calls me and says, you better get down to the city council because they're dissecting your equipment budget to death.
Oh, wow.
I get down there and I'm address the whole council, asking them, are you having problems with our equipment? And they're saying, you don't need half of this stuff on this list. So I looked at every last one of them and I said, hey, we are trying to provide access to healthy food in our area. We want to ensure that our small babies have such things like popcorn. They like popcorn. What's wrong with a popcorn maker? And they said, well, where we shop at, we don't have all this stuff in our store.
That's not their problem.
That's not exactly.
Maybe you should ask your problem.
So what I told every last one of the council people is, we have members in every one of your wards. We will make sure we vote you out at the next
Say it
election.
again. All right.
If you don't want to support our project, we're gonna make sure we vote you out.
We won't support your project.
So disinvestment.
There you go.
All right. How about we take two more?
I think for us,
Oh, can I catch you in the back right quick? And then I'll come back to you.
My name is Brian. I'm from the Grand Rapids Food Co-op. And one issue that I've recently started paying more attention to is driver's licenses for all. So immigrants who live and work here, they're not allowed to get driver's licenses. I mean, that's an obvious issue that Food Co-op wants to be part of, especially if there's a whole section of our community that can't get to the grocery store because they can't drive legally. Right? Most of them still try, but they can't.
They drive.
I was just gonna say food access in Brooklyn. We do have like grocery stores or whatever, but quality access to food. That's why we started, because a group of people realized that the grocery stores were coming up in affluent neighborhoods, but in our Central Brooklyn Black neighborhoods, we were getting supermarkets that weren't of quality, like supermarkets with one wall of freezers, which is not good because people were poking holes in food because they wanted to smell if the meat was rotten or not. Because when you go into a store, it's supposed to be cold. But like, that was the the in for a group of people to be angry about. Like, we want good quality food in Central Brooklyn. We live here. We've always, our kids live here, our grandparents, you know, why in our neighborhood we can't get healthy options. So we're gonna own the process and open up our own cooperative.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm a consultant. I'm on Shared Capital Cooperative Board, and I'm the former president of Green Star Co-op in Ithaca, New York. And so now I serve all co-ops, right? And there's a common thread of an issue in terms of how people are defining their terms, what they mean when they say something, which if you don't have, I don't know how you're gonna cooperate with each other, if you're all coming at it from different angles without at least one shared meaning to pursue what you're trying to go after. And people don't wanna have those conversations.
Yeah.
People are afraid of having those conversations, maybe because they're afraid of change, or arguing or debating or whatever, but you must have those conversations. It shapes everything, and it has the power to transform, which is what co-ops are all about.
Yeah.
And it even helps from the cooperatives serving other co-ops,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that one came up in a session. We did this session yesterday too on the Black Led track, and it reminds me of something that people talked about, you know, legalese basically being a barrier, and then people from the community who know what they're talking about, maybe because they don't know certain jargon or certain kinds of words to use, they don't get listened to. All right, so I know we could keep naming the issues because there are so many of them.
Transportation, I'll just throw out.
Transportation, okay.
Public transportation.
If y'all want to keep yelling them out while I find the slides, y'all can do that. If it's cathartic, particularly. And like, what session is this? Let's see, food co-op space building.
Can I ask about, and I can't see your face, but that what you were saying, we need this shared language.
Sorry, I'm squinting at you because I don't have my glasses on. I'm not upset or anything.
That's okay. I'm a beautiful 20-year-old girl with long hair. You would be amazed if you could see my beauteousness.
Just so you know, one of the things I can see is your hair. So what would you like to
what is the, what, tell me a little bit more about when you say shared language, what you mean, like cooperative or what?
A shared sense of meaning. So for instance, what do you mean when you say you're a cooperator? What does that even mean? Because you might come with different interpretations of what that means. And as cooperators in co-ops, we are democratically owned, and what does democracy mean to you? Because the people on January 6th had a totally different meaning of freedom and democracy, right? But they were serious about it.
Yes.
They were sincere about it. So, you know, what does it even mean to you? And how are you going to have a cohesive, thriving co-op in a democracy where everyone's voices are supposed to be able to be heard?
Right.
If you don't start talking about finding common ground.
Yes, thank you for that. And so I think to kind of move us towards this notion of gaining some common understanding, some shared understanding, I just wanted to lift up a little bit about the Collective Courage Fund. So it is a fund, right? It does mean that the Collective Courage Fund is giving out money to Black-led co-ops to do their work at the intersection of their economic and political power building, right? And these are general operating grants. So they can use the funds as they see fit. And the fund is designed to support more folks in being able to access and be able to vote. It's to really think about how civic engagement work lines up with our membership-based building efforts, right? So that we can continue to grow the membership. It's also about connecting, right, the issues in your community with issues in other people's communities so that we're also uplifting what are common issues, right? And being able to find networks outside of our local co-ops to connect with and organize with towards political and other kinds of change in our neighborhoods. And I think it's also an opportunity to visibilize the power in cooperatives, right? Especially food co-ops. Food co-ops literally mostly have like thousands of members, right? That's a whole base of people to be like, look, we got to do this, right? They're already shopping, they're already members, they are here. What else can we activate these folks in our community towards?
Yeah, it's almost like going backwards. Because, I mean, that's how co-ops really used to be, right? When my hair really wasn't gray. When I had brown hair.
Yes.
That really was what we were doing.
And somewhere along the way, right, that connection, I think, got missed.
Yep.
Mostly in the effort, I think, to professionalize.
Yep.
Right, and into being able to grow and sustain the enterprise. We often sacrifice the association of people building that we need to also invest critically in. And so just to give an update about where we are with the Collective Courage Fund, last year, in partnership with the National Black Food and Justice Alliance and with an organization called Piece by Piece that does some work in helping to fundraise and organize this effort as well, they put out a call to a group of Black cooperators. I don't know, everybody here probably doesn't know this, but the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, in relationship with the Food Co-op Initiative, over the past like 3 or 4 years have been, well, maybe the last 2 to 3 years, have been organizing calls for the Black-led co-ops and supporting them with peer-to-peer learning, inviting experts in to like teach and instruct about certain topics and issues, right? And so one of those conversations led to being able to connect with that group of folks and invite them into asking, what do you think this fund should do? Who was interested? We had about 13 applications, and I think 4 or 5 co-ops were funded out of that last year. This year, we put out a similar call to a broader network of folks. We received 57 applications this year. Now, we prioritized Black-led cooperatives that were food and land cooperatives, as well as those that had smaller budgets. And so about 60% of the applicants were from food and land co-ops. The other 40% were energy co-ops, worker-owned co-ops, you name it. I mean, it was vast, right? So the need is great. And I think that people are being able to see this opportunity to connect this economic power building with the political power building effort as well. And so when we think about like, what is the possibility, right? Y'all are startup co-ops, you got a lot on your plates as it is, and now you gotta start thinking about trying to get people to vote. Sometimes that might sound like a heavy lift to imagine like what it's gonna take to be able to do that, right? So I'm just gonna run briefly through a couple of strategies to consider, right? So some of you probably already have direct engagement. I don't know where the pandemic is going. It is still with us. Some of y'all might have gotten back to doing in-person engagements. Some of y'all might be doing virtual engagements. If you're doing new member orientations even, right? Why not talk about an issue? Why not encourage people to turn out for an election, right? So it can be very simple sound bites that you drop into the work that you're already doing, right? Is one kind of way of thinking about how to connect with people people that you're already seeing in your community. You can go bigger, right? Beyond your membership are the other residents and neighbors in your community. What would happen, or how could you imagine your cooperative maybe even partnering with another organization, right, to help sponsor a town hall or some kind of forum with a candidate, or even just to explore and talk about an issue that you know is going to impact your co-op, that you want your members to be aware of, that you want your broader community to be aware of, right? There are all of these kinds of things that are possible.
Good question.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. Thank you.
I'm not sure how this works in everybody else's communities, but I believe because our co-op is not a C4, there's like certain things that we can't do
Absolutely.
around like being political. So when you say invite a candidate, are you saying like people who are running or like that current person in office? Because I feel like sometimes it gets, we don't want people to be like, we're rallying around this one.
Yes.
If that makes, I don't know. How
No, it does. There's definitely a distinction. I mean, cooperatives are organized and incorporated in many different ways. A lot of the newer ones are kind of being incubated, fiscally sponsored by traditional C3 organizations that have limits on how they can engage in the political process. And there's still a lot of opportunity, right? So maybe you don't invite a candidate, but you invite all of the candidates, right, to be in conversation with the community about the thing, right? And sure, if you have a political official that's already elected in office, yeah, invite them into conversation to be accountable about some things.
And advocacy, you can always advocate for policies. You have to stay away from the people.
Right.
There's always advocacy.
Right. You can always talk about the issues, right? Even if you're not necessarily without naming who you might favor or disfavor.
Okay.
Yeah, that was one of the things that kind of concerned me just about co-ops in general getting involved into like politics, because you know our members, we have a diversity of people who may lean this way, may lean that way. You don't want to alienate anyone. So it's like, what are the nuances, the strategies that you can do to still engage people and get them interested in voting or caring about an issue, but not, as a co-op, not overly leaning one way or another that isolates and alienates your members.
Yeah, yeah. FP. Oh, I see.
Actually,
You want to respond?
Me or something in back?
You.
Okay. About that, because it's one of my things. Co-ops are by nature political entities. By the very definition of creating a co-op and the issues that you have and pulling community together and the reasons for pulling community together to have a co-op, you are a political animal, and there's no getting around that. What you can do, though, is be smart about how you address the fact that there are political issues that have to be addressed, or the kinds of things that people are going to come to you to talk about, which almost always end up around politics of some one kind or another. But there are ways to address that, because there are times when you do have to be careful, right? But there are ways to be careful and still get to what you need. So some of your conversations would need to be around how to do that. And you might want to reach out to people who have figured out how to do that for their co-ops and are going to help you do that with yours. But by nature, they came into being because of political issues in the 1700s and the 1800s and the 1900s and now.
Yeah.
So
I mean, and I think
don't shy away
you
from
think
it.
about how your co-op is also organized around certain values.
Yeah.
And you uphold and reflect your values back to your community.
Yeah.
And based on those values, that's how we're in conversation with each other.
Yeah.
Right?
The
And so we center our principles, we center our values. I know it was a struggle at my home food co-op, has 3 locations. The newest location is outside of the city of Philadelphia in a suburb. And the Philadelphia stores were distributing, I don't know, like, I don't even know what those things are called, but like y'all have probably seen the lawn signs that say we believe in, we, you know, whatever that thing is.
Yeah.
It didn't sit so well in the store in the suburb because there was a more diverse demographic. And some people were like, oh my gosh, like, we don't need to talk about race in the co-op, right? But then the co-op started talking about their values and lifting up their values. And if this is your values and you're a part of this community, then you're accepting these values. And if you're not, you know, so I think that it is, and I'm not saying it's easy to draw a line in any of that, but I think it is a place to be centered in and to lean on who you are and what your identity is. And if you don't know what that is, then to figure that stuff out.
And remember that there are a lot of co-op members who do not know what the cooperative principles are.
And what they're about, yeah.
Yeah, and when you read those principles, you can see the politics in the principles.
Right. And that's the opportunity too, right? In thinking about doing this kind of civic engagement work, you're really doing member engagement.
Yeah.
You're deepening opportunities and ways for people to be in conversation. You don't have to even like tell people, this is what I want you to think about the issue.
Right.
But you can be inviting people and holding space for people to be in conversation about issues. You can be inviting external organizations and speakers in to help address and facilitate and hold the space with you. You don't have to go it alone.
I think the connection too is about, co-ops are about participation and being involved. And when people understand a model of participating in their community because it's a democratic organization, then that can be translated to other parts of participation. Because one of the biggest problems in our country is lack of participation, in elections especially, and locally.
Yes.
Huge problem. So when people start to feel empowered that they are part of a community, they can translate those principles to other actions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The power of cooperatives.
Yes,
So can I see that last slide one more time? I'm just about to get.
Oh, sure. And you know, all of these slides are going to be shared out after the conference.
Thank you.
So we have a few more minutes left, and I want to invite y'all, since y'all like to talk so much.
We all about participation.
Clearly. I want to try to give y'all 10 minutes. You can find your own group of folks to reconvene with or find some new folks. But to start thinking about these questions. And these are just prompts. You don't have to answer them all, but they're offered to help you think about, you know, we went through these considerations about direct engagement with your membership. How do you embed this conversation about civic engagement with your members? We talked about what it might look like to invite the broader community into conversation about civic engagement. We didn't really talk about, but y'all probably read the slide, about digital engagement.
Oh.
Most of you probably have some kind of social media presence, right? Where you're actively doing that work. Maybe it wouldn't take too much more to kind of like plug in some of these conversations or issues or articles to make people aware, you know, about things that might be impacting your cooperative or your community. So think about, do you have capacity to do any of this? What would it take, right, to embed and to expand what you're thinking about including in your base building efforts? But also really, there might be barriers. What are they? What would keep you from doing it or make it hard for you to do it? And then to also think about, what do you need? And when I say resources, I'm thinking about money, people, time, education. Like, what do you need to envision being able to engage your community in these important issues that y'all brought up? So I invite you to take 10 minutes and be in conversation, and we'll just wrap up our last 5 minutes with just sharing back. Curious about what other people talked about. Who wants to share what happened in your conversations, if you answered or addressed any of these questions? Was it hard?
I vote for our one beautiful spokesperson.
So we were discussing ways to really like engage the members in the different policies and issues going on in the city. Some of the co-ops will have a community room. And so maybe inviting members in to discuss different topics and issues that are going on in the city. And kind of describing the city itself as a co-op. So that members can understand that they're already a part of the co-op. They've been a part of the co-op. Been a part of a co-op. This is just a co-op on a smaller scale, so that they can understand that for the most part they really already know how a co-op works. It's not something that's foreign or strange.
Thank you. So we all practice cooperation in some ways, in all different kinds of parts of our lives. Absolutely. Thank you. Anyone else?
Okay. We were talking about the lack of capacity, that there is so much to do, but that's that even just putting out social media posts, take very little capacity into something. And then going back to, I forget, Ms. I'm gonna call you Ms. Ithaca, but that's not your name. Patrice. What Patrice is saying is that by nature we are political, and we're all values-based organizations, and so it's very. It could be as simple as just stating, these are the values that we espouse in our organization, and here's an issue for you to pay attention to, and then letting people make their own inferences as to how the values of the organization affect that election or reflect on those candidates or whatever it is. And then you kind of thread that needle of legality, and if someone wants to be offended, like they're making that choice. You're not actually doing anything offensive.
Thank you.
I actually would like to piggyback on that. One of my issues at Green Star, when it was election time, right? And like in regular elections, people tend to go for the incumbent, right? Because a familiar face, it's a face they know. But you really have to put what that person has been doing while they have been in office. You have to know what's been going on at Green Star for the longest time. Only put how long they had been on the board. There were no attendance records. There were no opinions about what they had done while they were in office, and they very rarely had to speak out about. Be held accountable for what they did while they were on the board. And so you don't really know what you're voting for. And if you want your members to be held accountable, as well as the board, and so you have to understand that, right? And so you have to be creative and find ways to make sure that the electorate is getting the information they need in order to have the strongest board members to do the work, because in most co-ops, it's representative democracy. You elect board members who take care of the business of the co-op, right? But you have to have the right people representing you, right? And you only know who that is if you're well informed on what's been going on at the board level. So.
Well, I think that's what we have time for today. Thank you all so very much for having this conversation with each other. Happy cooperation.